So after Ohio State got shocked off by Oregon in Columbus, at least in my opinion, it looked like Texas A&M had a pretty easy walk to get in a top 4 spot going into this week. Now, Texas A&M was in Colorado. Obviously, there's a bit of an altitude change there. If you watched any of the previews, not just my videos, but anyone's previews, they're going to talk about the altitude and that stuff. And did it really make a difference? I don't know. I can't make the judgment there. But obviously, that this Texas A&M game that they did play against Colorado kind of hurt them in the AP as they dropped 2 spots from what they were at when they had. In my opinion, obviously Oregon is now that 4th team, but in my opinion, if Texas A&M took care of business against Colorado in a more convincing fashion, Texas A&M would have been put at that number 4 spot. So obviously that doesn't happen. Haynes King gets injured early in that game. Zach Calzada has to come in, and it took a long time for Texas A&M to finally sniff at the end zone until it was a late 4th quarter. Obviously, you had Isaiah Spiller go into the end zone, makes a nice catch in the end zone, and Texas A&M is able to beat the Colorado Buffaloes by 3 points in Denver. What is next for Texas A&M? And that's what we're going to talk about here, because now that Haynes King is ultimately injured, it has looked like he is going to be out for 5 weeks with a lower leg injury. Where on earth does Texas A&M go from this point? Because this week they get kind of an easier game. They play New Mexico, okay? No matter who you put in at quarterback there, Zach Calzada should be able to go out and have a good game there. And they're not going up against anything special, but it's the week after you go up against Arkansas, who, if you watched Arkansas against Texas, Arkansas is not going to be an easy out by any stretch at all this season. Arkansas is looking really, really good. And if you go into that game in Dallas, or it's in Arlington, I'm pretty sure it's in AT&T Stadium, if you go into that game in week 4 and you do not have an offense that you feel confident enough can score, where Arkansas does, Arkansas can rush the football now, you're going to be in trouble if you're Texas A&M. So what does Texas A&M really have to focus on to get back to confidence in being able to score? Because Texas A&M's defense, if we just want to go off on a tangent here for a second, if you watch this Texas A&M defense, I look at some of the best defenses in the country. I look at Alabama, I look at Georgia, and Texas A&M is right up there. Like, I'm dead serious. That's how good I feel like Texas A&M's defense is this season. They got an amazing D-line. Their secondary has really surprised me this season. Great linebackers. Texas A&M's defense swarms to the ball. They get to the ball, and they hit hard, and they finish tackles. And I think that was a huge reason why Texas A&M was able to beat Colorado this weekend, because Colorado had an decent offense. Like, if Texas A&M's defense wasn't that good, there's no doubt in my mind that Colorado would have came out with a win in that game, because one more score in that game for Colorado and it's ball game over. One more touchdown in that game and it's ball game over. Colorado shocks off number 5 Texas A&M, and we got a whole different ball game that we're going out with going into week 3. But Texas A&M's defense, it really reminded me of just watching a Chicago Bears game, or the old Chicago Bears, because I'm a big Bears fan. Our defense sucks now, but back in like 2019, where our defense would just constantly be going out and getting stops and our offense just couldn't do anything, and then we finally squeak out with a win somehow. So watching that Texas A&M Colorado game really took me back to like the 2019 Chicago Bears, but now our defense and our offense isn't good. So enough about that, enough about the Bears. Let's get back to Texas A&M. So this Texas A&M offense, if you look at what they were able to do in that game against Colorado, now obviously Calzada threw 18 for 38, not the greatest percentage there. You obviously want to get that up. He had a ton of missed throws, a ton of short throws, and a ton where it just seemed like they could not find any other guys open. And just, I don't know if it was drop balls or just good coverage on Colorado's part, but no matter what, especially on third downs, Calzada just was not able to get that ball in, and it was a huge struggle the whole game until finally that final drive, or the drive when Calzada makes it into the end zone and then fumbles through the end zone. That was chaotic, but they were able to finally score in one of the last drives of the game. Obviously a passing touchdown, so Calzada ended the game. What did he end the game with? 18 for 38, 183 yards for 1 touchdown, a 49.9 QBR. Calzada, obviously this was his first game. He didn't really know that he was going to be playing in this game. Now, as a backup quarterback, you always have to be prepared to get into the football game, but it's different just getting thrown in after your starting quarterback gets injured. So I don't want to go too hard on Calzada here, because obviously this was his first game. He gets thrown in a situation where, let's say he wasn't necessarily ready for it yet, and it obviously showed with the stats and everything like that. So there definitely can be some growing to be done from this game for Zach Calzada. But you look at the rest of Texas A&M's offense, and before the season, I raved about this rushing game. Because you have Isaiah Spiller, who's one of the best running backs in all of college football, in my opinion. You have Devon Achane, who's one of the fastest guys and has one of the best breakout abilities of any running back in the SEC. And then even if you want to throw in Anaya Smith, I know we talk about him as a wide receiver now, but he does some work out of the backfield. They have a three-headed monster in the backfield for Texas A&M. So if you want to move the ball up and down the field, the rushing game, especially with a newer quarterback, a younger quarterback who still has to get more experience and get more confident in his game, the rushing game has to be there. And that's what was not there for Texas A&M this Saturday. If you look at their total rushing stats, 97 yards, Achane only rushed for 50, and then you had Isaiah Spiller. Yes, that is right. Isaiah Spiller only rushing for 20 yards in this game. He had 8 rushes for only 20 yards. And you just look at that and you're like, if this offense wants to get anything going, if they want to put up points this season, like, let's not forget, in all likelihood, Haynes King is going to be out for that Alabama game. And you know, this is Texas A&M's, many people have talked about this is Texas A&M's year to go out and finally beat Alabama. You're not going to be able to beat Alabama if you're not able to score the football. You have to be able to establish some kind of identity on offense if Texas A&M wants to go into that game. Even the Arkansas game, even the Mississippi State game that Texas A&M has coming up, they have to be able to establish some kind of offense. And I see with the young, inexperienced quarterback in Zach Calzada, who still needs to grow, the rushing game has to be that identity for Texas A&M. Now, the offensive line we knew was going to be a bit of a struggle for Texas A&M. They really got to get going and pushing the offensive line back. The defensive line of the other team back. This offensive line really has to get some push to it, create some holes for the running backs, and really push that defensive line to be able to establish this running game, because we know the talent that you have in the backfield. No questions asked. We know that the talent that you have at all the receiving positions. No questions about that. The offensive line and the quarterback was my main concern for Texas A&M coming into this season, and it's really showing now. Even though your starter did get injured, Haynes King was still a question mark for me. Now, he's come in and he's had a decent start to his Texas A&M career. Obviously, he had some troubles in the Kent State game, throwing some picks there, and now he's obviously hurt. Calzada is now the guy, and he had some accuracy issues in that first game. It's all coming back to QB and offensive line, and in my opinion, as long as you have Calzada being able to be a game manager, he doesn't need to be some breakout guy. He needs to make some throws, obviously. He needs to get more accurate with his passing. But I think the rest of this Texas A&M season really relies on how well this offensive line is able to push the D-lines back, because the running game is how Texas A&M is going to be able to get down the field. For the rest of the season, that is going to be Texas A&M's strength, or it has to be Texas A&M's strength if they want to put up more than 10 points against a Colorado defense. So for the next couple games, you're going to have New Mexico. This is a chance to really get some confidence in your guys, go out and put up a high-scoring game for Texas A&M. But when it comes to that Arkansas game, this offensive line and Calzada have to be ready to do something more than what happened in this game, because receiving what happened in this game, they were caught for 191 yards. You had Weidermeyer catching for like 66. You had Spiller catching for 56. Achane catching for 24. And then your wide receivers like Lane, he seemed like the guy to go to on third down. Had a rough time getting him the ball. So try to get him the ball more, be more accurate towards him, and let's see Texas A&M how they do in the next couple games without Haynes King, going forward with Calzada, and how this offensive line is able to really establish this running game going forward.